Hi, I'm Matt Fermi, and I'm here at Soldiers of Fortune Paintball, and I'm here doing teardowns of the Bravo One Tactical for Night Shadow Productions. So we'll start off, as always, make sure your air is off the gun, make sure there's no paintballs in it, and take your barrel off, make sure it's completely safe before you do any disassembly of it. So first thing I'm going to do is take off the barrel. Now, something to note on Tippmanns, and this is something I learned doing the course, any 98s, especially older model 98s, the TPN series, except the Tango one, you want to leave the feed neck on the marker because it helps you a lot during disassembly. So I'm putting the feed neck on right now, and you'll see why later on, and I'll point out why later on. So as you can see, I have my mat set up, I got my oil, I got my Q-tips, I got my Allen keys here, and I got thread Loctite just in case I need it if I notice some screws are coming out very easily. So first thing you start off, take this little knob off from the caulking. And I'm placing all my parts on this side of the mat. You can see on this mat there's little compartments. If you don't have a mat like this, do it on a clear work area and maybe have like little trays where you can put all your screws in that. Okay, so I'll take off all the parts where I don't need Allen keys, so I'm going to take off the clip here. And now I'm going to take the stock off first. Sorry guys, I'm just trying to get a good angle for you guys to see. Now we all know Tippmanns are pretty much the toughest guns on the market, but sometimes you do have to disassemble it. If you drop it in mud, you break a lot of paint in it. You will eventually need to do this. I really suggest everybody take their time and learn how to do their Tippmanns, because even though they're a very tough and robust gun, when you do have to take it apart, there is a lot of parts in it. But now, because of the design of the Tippmann, it is a clamshell. You can see where it's been made. So when you take these apart, you're going to be exposing all the parts. So you need to really take your time doing this. And even if you just get the marker and you go out and play your first time, get used to taking this gun apart. You never know when you're actually going to need to do it. Most of the time you probably won't. You could probably oil it without even taking apart the marker. But I'm going to show you guys how to take it apart, and then when I have it fully reassembled, I'm going to show you how to oil it without disassembling it. So I'm taking off the shroud on the front. Now that I have these parts off, I'm going to start with the bottom line first. These two screws here in your ASA. You can see each of the screws. You can see each of the screws on the marker. They have a little bonding on the bottom. If you ever notice this starting to come off, that's why you have a thread Loctite. You can get any type of brand as long as it's a blue medium strength. You don't want to use red because red is permanent Loctite. So once I get those screws out, I'm going to put the body back down on the table here. I'm going to try and hold it up while I'm disassembling it so you guys have a good view. And I'll just start taking out each of these screws out of the marker to disassemble it. Once I get all these screws out, you'll be able to see me separate the clamshell. And when I separate the clamshell, I'm going to have to be holding certain parts, which I will point out, in order for springs and such not to fly out and for you to lose them permanently. I will also, as I'm taking apart the marker, be going through some of the parts that you see break on these coming into the store here. One of the major ones that you see over time is air leaking down the barrel. When the air leaks down the barrel, what it is, 9 times out of 10, is your valve. When your valve starts leaking, it's just wear and tear on the marker or playing in for example, we're up here in Canada playing in temperatures where in the summer you're playing in a nice warm temperature. In the winter, it's very cold outside if you're still playing outdoor using winter paintballs, and the cold weather is expanding and retracting the O-rings. It also happens with CO2. So sometimes you'll get a leak from that, and you'll bring it inside, be upset about your marker leaking, you try and test fire it again, and it's sealed up. Basically, what that's telling you is you need to get a little more oil in your marker, and that will help sealing the O-rings. Sometimes, although, you do need to replace them. And when you do need to replace them, a leak down the barrel, like I said, 9 times out of 10 is your valve. And when you do need to replace your valve with Tippmann, it's best just to go into a store and purchase a new one. Sometimes you can get a warranty valve from Tippmann in which they'll replace it for you. Now when you're buying it out of a store, you're usually spending about $20. And it's the easiest way to do it, because all you're doing is taking out this line and rethreading it back in. Okay, so now I got all the screws out. I'm going to be breaking the clamshell here for you guys. One of the reasons why the feed neck stays in here is because they call it a spring, but it's an actual, like almost like a hair clip, where it's a piece of metal, but it's bent, but it has enough elasticity in it for this piece to go up and down for your feed neck. So the reason why you keep the feed neck in is because it holds this piece in, holding that little spring from popping out. And really you never need to take it out anyways. So now I'm going to separate the gun, and I'm kind of pulling at the top part. Now what I'm going to do now is hold onto the back piece where your stock goes, because the spring back there can pop out if you bring it out with the other half. You can see me slowly trying to take this off. Once it gets loose, I open it up. You can see some of the pins came out with it. And this is what I'm talking about with the disassembly of the marker. So I'm going to take these pins and put them back in place, and then I'll lift the marker up so you guys can all see what I'm taking apart. So here's your marker. This is the inside after I open up the clamshell. You can see some of the springs that are very easy to fly out. Reason why I hold the stock in is because this probably has the most tension behind it. Another spring that tends to fly out, and I'm going to use an Allen key here just to point it out, is this. This is your sear spring. It's very easy for it to fly out because it just has a little insert in here where it holds onto. Some of the other parts that might stick onto your other half of the clamshell is these nuts here for your bottom line. And there's your trigger spring. Don't get these two mixed up, they are different tensions. So what you're looking at when you take apart your marker, you're going to be removing all this stuff, which I'll do, and you'll be cleaning out around here. Some of the things that you might see go wrong, and one thing I do suggest with Tippmann owners, no matter what, yes, I keep on saying these are tough guns, and they are, but you should always get a small Tippmann repair kit out of a store and replace everything that's in the kit with your marker once a year. The reason why I suggest that is because year after year your marker wears down, and eventually it won't be shooting like the day you bought it. What you want to do is use these kits in them, and that way your markers each year is going to have the same consistent performance. So right here is your bolt attempt. It's held in by nothing, it's just held in by the clamshell. So what I'll do is I'll start taking it apart like this. And that way you guys can see exactly what I'm doing. And one of the things I'm going to take off right now so I don't lose it is the sear spring. Put that over there. I can pull the safety out. Safety is just held in by a couple O-rings. I can pull the trigger out. Oops, there's a pin. There's the spring for the trigger. Now you can see this is a brand new Tippmann. Now when you're actually taking this apart on your own, of course there'll be a lot of grime here. What you want to do is have a nice rag to clean out everything and just wipe down this area here, because sometimes you'll see like sludge build up from use being outdoor and everything. So I'll pull out the back stock piece. The back stock piece, your spring. This is a spring guide. This is a bumper. And the reason why you need this in here is because if you forget it and the gun is firing, this piece, this big hammer of yours is just sliding back and slamming into your plastic here. Eventually it'll blow this whole piece right off when you're firing. So you have that bumper, so that way when it comes back, it's impacting this and it's having less impact on you. Now to take off this top part, I just push this and rotate it. Take out your connecting rod, slide your front bolt out, and slide your hammer out. Now the hammer, that's your cocking pin. And what Tippmann did was, they reduced the weight of it. I'll try to do this with one hand. And inside your hammer is just this plastic piece. And what it was done is to reduce the weight. People sometimes ask me, well, why put this back in? The reason why this is back in here is to guide your spring, so it's not bending and curving when you're playing. So we got all that apart. Now everybody's going to be wondering, why aren't you taking the valve out? Well, I'll tell you why. The valve has these two screws holding it in. These two screws, Tippmann Loctites in. Sometimes you'll take it off and you'll see red Loctites, some of the older models. The newer ones, you'll see a bonding agent like that. That's almost like thread, I think they call it pipe or I think thread dope or something, pipe dope. And it's used, you'll see it sometimes at Home Depot. The reason why they're starting to use this more often is so that way you're not stripping the screws trying to take this out. The only reason you're ever going to take this out is if you're leaking down the barrel and you need to change the valve. Other than that, please don't touch it. Everything else can be cleaned all around the gun. You can get a rag, you can get a thinner one, slide it in between your power tube and your body, and you can clean out any paint here. The reason why you have Q-tips, you can use them to clean out really fine areas that you can't get the cloth in. If you want to clean out where your safety is, if you want to clean out inside of here. Okay? Now obviously I don't have to clean it out much because it's a brand new gun, so I'll just start reassembling it. Now I'm going to reassemble it the way I took it apart. So, put the front bolt and the hammer back in place. Oh, I'm sorry, before I put the hammer back together, I'm going to make sure I put in plastic piece. Now when I put this in, I'm going to line it up so the hole you can see going right through. The reason why I got to line it up is for this caulking to be put in properly. So as I put it back together, I'm showing you guys like this so that way you have an easy sight of it. I'm going to make sure both holes are facing upwards for the connecting rod. I'm going to place it together, rotate it around. Now we got our connecting rod in. I can get my caulking pin. When I put it in place, I got to make sure that hole is going straight out the back. So if I don't put it in right, the spring's not going to connect properly. Get my spring. Sorry, gotta do it like this. Place my spring back in. Spring guide. Bumper. And the back piece for the stock. Okay, so we got that part assembled. Now we'll start doing all these pins. Now the one most recognizable pin you use is for your sear. You can see it's black. The reason why it's black, it's been anodized. The reason why they anodize it is so it has a longer life. This pin goes through the most rubbing on the gun. So they have to anodize it to ensure that it lasts longer. It lasts their 2-year warranty, it lasts their Tippmann brand name basically. So I put the sear in. Black spring goes with the sear. And then I can start reinserting the rest of the pins in here. You can see all the holes for the pin. Okay. Get my trigger back in. Okay, my safety, my ball detent, and the nuts for the bottom. Now before I put the other clamshell back in, what I'm going to talk about is another issue you see with these guns where they start decocking or going full out. A couple of reasons why. One, you're breaking paint, the gun's really dirty. The other reason is sometimes the hammers wear down, and you can see it wearing down from where this is cut in. It starts rounding out, so it starts slipping over your sear, so it doesn't catch it each time it goes back. Another reason, but it's more rare, is I'm going to take this trigger back out because I want to make sure you guys see this. Your trigger has this small metal piece coming out. The reason why they have that is every time you pull the trigger, and I'll kind of do the motion, you're pulling the trigger like that, it's lifting your sear up. When it lifts your sear up, it drops your hammer, therefore letting the hammer slide forward and shooting your gun. Sometimes this little piece here gets bent just from overuse. And it gets bent coming upwards, so the sear's not catching it each time. So what you need to do is, you get a tool, I'm showing you with a screwdriver, but you'll get a tool that's used to sharpen chainsaws. And what you do is, you grind that down slightly with the tool. And the reason why you're going to use a handheld tool is because you're not going to apply a little part like this to a grinder. It'll rip it to shreds. You're going to use this small tool, grind this down a little tiny bit, and put it back in, and it'll probably work fine for you again. These are just some of the things I see happening in the store, and over a long period of use, eventually things do wear down. You can always just replace the part and buy a new one, but it is repairable. So, oops, I'll put this trigger back in. Okay, now that we have that back in place, I got the other side of the clamshell. Now, of course, when you're reassembling these guns, you want to make sure these areas where your bolt's sliding is nice and clean. Again, rag, when you have them apart, rub them down, make sure it's nice and clean. Now, before I put this on, I just thought of something. You want to put oil, when you're oiling the marker, and you have it apart like this, you're going to put oil on this ring, O-ring, rub it around, and this hammer O-ring, oops, you're going to put it on there when you're reassembling your marker, and also show oiling when your marker is fully assembled. Because the oiling I just showed you can be done without disassembling your marker completely. There's the clamshell back on, taking our time to do it, because of those springs. So, nice click, you look down, nice and hard together. If you ever notice it's not coming together like this, take it apart. One of your springs might have popped out and you need to reassemble it. So now that I have it together, I'm always kind of holding it, trying to hold it from the center until I put one screw in. So I'll just start by putting one of the front screws in. What I like to do, if I have a nice grip on it, I'll just place all the screws inside the marker. That way I can just reassemble it quickly. Now you'll notice some of the screws are slightly longer. These ones are for the thicker areas of your marker. Now that I have the screws in, start tightening them all up. Now I don't tighten one up so much on one side because it'll lift the rest of the clamshell up. What I'm doing right now is just snugging them nice in. And then after I have all the screws in, I'll go back and redo them all. Make sure they're nice and tight. Now you don't want to torque too much because you don't want to strip the heads of your screws. So you're just going to put it in a little small turn. Once you do this enough, you'll get an idea on how much torque you can apply. So I've done that. Put the bottom line back on. Once I get this bottom line on, we'll put the cover over the caulking. Put my clip back in. The shroud in. Now the shroud screw is a longer one. And of course, your stock. And once I'm done this, we'll then go through oiling the marker without having a full disassembly like we showed. Now, when you oil the marker without complete disassembly, it's if you're not breaking any paint. Let's say you're playing twice a month, one time go out, just oil it quickly. Second time, at least take apart your marker and make sure everything's clean on the inside. Even if you're playing in an indoor that has sand on the ground, you might get some of that sand in there and it'll cause one hell of a mess. Barrel back on, and your marker's done. So, if you're oiling it without taking apart your marker, first thing you do is cock it back. You can see your hammer O-ring slightly through there. Drop oil on that. Drop your elbow. As you decock it, put your finger, pull the trigger, and you can see it decock. I'm holding it, and you can see me moving the bolt back and forth. Drop oil on your bolt, and then you'll put 2 drops in your ASA where your tank goes on. The reason why you put 2 drops in there is you put your CO2 or compressed air on right after, and you can fire off about 5 shots, and that will oil your valve that you're not supposed to take apart. And that's the full disassembly of the Bravo 1. Thank you for watching Night Shadow Production.